Today we're going to look at studying different data types. I'm going to introduce you to a new data type called the Bool data type, and then we're going to look at how the Bool data type is used in selection statements using the if keyword. So first thing I'd like you to do is to open up the idle shell. So open idle, and when you're ready, you see the screen. This is the shell screen. I want you to create a new file, and let's put that there. And then I'm going to save this file as, I'm going to save my file to the desktop, and I'm going to call it test2.py. I've already got one called test.py. Right, so there you can see it's path desktop test2.py, and now let's have a look at the data type of some values. Now remember, data type is also a class, so if we print the type of a value like 7, and let's see what happens when we run that. Now remember, if you try and run without saving, it will remind you to save. There it is. You just say OK. It's now running. That's good. So if we now look at the file and what happens when it runs, 7 is a data type or class int. Int is short for integer. That's a whole number. Now let's look at the class or data type of a number which has a floating point number, a float. So this is a number, but it's got a point. It's got a fractional part. I'm going to save this file, and when it runs, you'll see it's going to restart in the shell here, and now we can see that our floating point number is of class float. So there's that. Now let me maximize this window. I can minimize. Let's close the shell window and maximize this window. Right, now let's have a look at the type of a value which is a string. So a string, as you remember, is text, and text is any value in quote marks. And now you need two closing brackets here because we have two opening brackets. One of the most common programming errors is to forget to match the number of brackets. So let's save this and run. And here you can see that this is of class string. A string is just text. Text can be either in double quotes or single quotes. You can also use triple single quotes. But for now, let's leave it at this. Now I'm going to introduce you to another data type, which is the Boolean data type, Bool for short. And now we've talked about numbering systems, we've talked about binary, and binary has values 0 and 1. Computers use binary to do all their calculations, processing, and 0 and 1 could also be represented by values false and true. Now let's show you the value false. I'm going to print, let's do the type of value false. Notice when you type false, F has to be a capital letter, the remainder are lowercase letters. It will be printed in orange because this is a keyword of the Python 3 language. Now the data type of false will be type class bool. When I run this, you'll see it. And there it is, it's type bool. Bool is short for Boolean, named after the English mathematician George Bool. He was born around the 1850s or that sort of time range, and he worked on logic and mathematics which used only two values, true and false. It's called Boolean logic and Boolean arithmetic. If you've done discrete math, Macam 101, 102, 201, you'll be familiar with Boolean arithmetic, which is essentially what discrete math is. But if you haven't done discrete math, don't worry about it. Now, there are only two values of the Boolean data type, and those are false and true. So I'm just going to copy this line and paste it here. Type in the word true. T is capital letter, and it should be printed in orange. These are the only two values of the Boolean data type. Now, if you run this, you'll see there we've got these two are the bool. If I close the shell here, run again in a clean shell, then we can see clearly that 7 is an integer class, 3.142 is a floating point number, this is a string, strings are always shown in green, and the values false and true are Boolean values. There are only two Boolean values, true and false. As you know, we could have any number of strings, any number of floating point numbers, values, any number of integers like 7, 10, 0, -2. But there are only two values of the Boolean data type, and that's false and true, sometimes represented in a computer as 0 and 1. Now, why would we use Boolean data type? Well, let's have a look at a value or an expression that evaluates to true or false. Let's do something like this. Print 6 is greater than 2. Now, 6, this is not going to result in a number. It's going to result in either true or false. If I said to you 6 is greater than 2, we know that's true. So this will be resulting in a value which is a Boolean value of type true. When this runs, the very last output will be the word true. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to run it. And you can see the last output is the word true. Let's run that again in a clean shell, so we don't get confused by a previous run. And there we go. So 7 is an integer, 3.142 is a floating point number, this is a string, and false is a Boolean data type, so is the word true. 6 greater than 2 has got a value of true. So let's have a look at a value that's false then. If I said print 2 is greater than 6, well, of course, we know that is false. So when the program runs, this will print true, this will print false. So these two are known as Boolean expressions. They're not math expressions, these are Boolean or logical expressions. Sometimes they're also known as conditions. This one is true, this one is false. So let's run this. And there we have true and false. Now when we restarted, this is the output of our latest program, which is here. If you ever want to close the shell, close it at any time, so that when you run it opens a new clean shell, and then you're not going to get confused by a previous run. So there we have it. 2 is greater than 6, that's obviously false, and it prints as false. So these are Boolean expressions. Not the same as math expressions where you're doing arithmetic, such as 2 plus 2, which would give you 4. These are Boolean expressions. They will give you a value which is either true or false. Now, why would we use Boolean expressions like this? Well, let's do something like this. Let's have a variable called score, and we're going to assign to score a value of 91. Okay. Now, maybe I want to test whether somebody has passed or failed a course depending on their score. So let's say if they get a score of 50 or more, they pass. If they don't get 50 or more, then they fail. So how would we write that in Python? Well, we're going to use the selection statement called if. Type if. You'll notice it comes out in orange because if is a keyword, a special word of the Python 3 language. So now I'm going to say if score is greater than, well, let's say greater than or equal to. Notice there's no space between the greater than and the equal to. So if score is greater than or equal to 50, now there's your condition, that's either true or false. After your condition, or your logical expression, your Boolean expression, you have to put a colon. Now that's part of the syntax of the language. Now when I press the enter key, I haven't pressed it yet, when I do, you'll notice that there will be 4 spaces here. Don't delete those spaces. They're part of the syntax of the language and they're important. So I'm going to press enter right now. And you can see on the left of the flashing cursor there are 4 spaces. Now where the cursor is, that's where you're going to type whatever you want to happen if the score is greater than or equal to 50. So I'm going to print you passed the course. Oops. Right, so that's what I want to print. Now when I press the enter key this time, my flashing cursor is directly underneath the P of print. And this is the location of if I want to print something else, I can do it here, or if I want to do any other Python statement, this is where I would do it if the score is greater than or equal to 50. So I might want to say print well done. Yeah. Now when I press enter, you'll see the cursor is flashing. Basically, this is the location where I'll put in any other print statement that I want to be executed if the score is greater than or equal to 50. Well, I think I'm finished now. So what I'm going to do is save the code. And now I'm ready to run. So it's going to show me the data types of these values. It's going to show me the Boolean result of these 2 print statements. We're assigning a value of 91 to the variable score, and then we're using if to see if this is true, then these 2 statements will be executed. So now when I run, and we've restarted the code here, you can see all the data types, and then 6 is greater than 2 is shown as true, 2 is greater than 6 is shown as false. And then I said if the score is greater than or equal to 50, then it should print, you passed the course, well done. And that's what happened. The score is greater than or equal to 50, so it prints, you passed the course, well done. But what would happen if I failed the course? So let's close the shell. And I'm now going to put a score of 49 here. Now 49 is less than 50, so the condition here now will be false. Now if this is false, these will not be executed. And in fact, you won't see anything printed at all because this is false. You'll only see these lines printed if this is true. So when I run this, you will not see this. So let's run this. And there it is. It doesn't print out you passed because you didn't pass. So if we want to give a different message, if this is false, then that's very easy to do. All we need to do now, let's just close the old shell. I'll close that one. So if this is true, this will be executed, these lines. But otherwise, we can put in an else keyword. Now the else keyword gives you the alternate. So you've got a choice. If it's true, it will print, you passed the course, well done. Else, now notice you have to put that colon there again after the word else, and the word else is directly underneath the word if. All of these statements are in a straight line at the beginning of the line. These 2 lines were indented. This is called indenting, where Python automatically gave you a tab or 4 spaces for you to print the lines that you want to be executed if this is true. Now these 2 lines are both one above the other, indented by 4 spaces. Now when I press the Enter key now, it's going to leave me the same 4 spaces so that I can type in whatever I want to be executed or run if this is false. So I'm pressing the Enter key now. Notice those 4 spaces are there, do not delete them. And now I'm going to print, you failed this time. Now, just to remind you here, these are little hints that come up every now and again. Don't worry about them right now. They're supposed to be helpful, but when you're beginning, they're not always very helpful. So just ignore them. So if they didn't pass, they failed. So I'm going to say, you failed this time. And then, oh, I forgot to put my colon there. I've put a colon. Sorry, I need my quote mark there, not a colon. And then underneath, I'm going to say print better luck next time. Right, that looks good. So now, if they pass, they get a score greater than or equal to 50, then it's going to say this. Otherwise, it's going to say this. So let's run. Right, so in this case, because the score was 49, they failed. This is not true, therefore these 2 statements are executed. If this was true, these statements will be executed, but this poor person failed. Right, now this is okay, but what if I want to enter the score from the keyboard instead of just putting a score into the program itself? Well, I can do that easily by using the input statement. So if I want to input a score, now scores are going to be integers, so we're going to do int input. And then we have to give a message, an instruction to let the user know that they should input the score. So I'm going to say, please input your score. Now, don't forget, if you have 2 opening brackets or parentheses, you need to have 2 closing ones to match. The most common error of all time is basically not matching up the number of brackets. Now I'm going to show you this program running correctly, and I'll show you what happens if we forget a bracket. So this will input an integer. The input function only inputs strings. It has to be done in 2 steps. You convert your input into an integer so that then it can be compared to another integer. So now I'm going to run my program, and let's see what happens. So it runs, and now saying please input your score. Now at this point, because we're doing an input, the Python is waiting for you to input something at the keyboard. So you input your score, you press the return key, and then it will continue. But Python will wait, and it will wait forever until a score is entered. Now it's expecting, in this particular program, it's going to convert my input into an integer. So we must input something that looks like an integer. So this time I'm going to put in 98, which is the sort of score that I'd always like to get. And then press the Enter key. And it says you passed the course, well done. So that's great, it works. Now I promised to show you what would happen if you forget this bracket. So if you've got 2 opening brackets, then you must have 2 closing brackets. Now if you forget, and I can guarantee that you will, this is what happens when you run. Invalid syntax. Invalid syntax. I got a message. Now syntax is the rules of the language. Invalid syntax means you've broken the rule. Now actually it's showing me a little red point here over the colon. Now when you get a syntax error, sometimes Python doesn't know that the error has happened until it goes down to the next line. So there's actually nothing wrong with this line here. The problem is on the previous line. So if you see something like this, check out the line before it. Just double check that each bracket is matched with the same number of brackets at the end. So we've got 2 opening brackets. We need 2 closing brackets. So I'm just going to click on OK here. I'm going to correct this with the extra bracket there. Now when I need to save it again to make sure everything is good. And then when I run, this time it runs. So let's fail this time. Let's put 32. And it said I failed this time. Better luck next time. So there is my program. So we're showing different data types, also known as classes. I've introduced true and false. These are the class Boolean, or Bool for short. Here I'm showing you a Boolean expression. These evaluate or result in a value of true or false. And here I'm showing you how to input an integer and then compare that integer variable to a value to see if somebody has passed or failed. And then using the if statement, so if gives you a selection, it's going to give you a selection, one thing or the other. So it's either pass or fail in this case. So that's my introduction to different data types, the Boolean data type and the selection statement if. Now, you should go to the course schedule and have a look at all your reading assignments for week 2. In week 2, that's where we introduce the selection statement. We've also looked at numbering systems. This week we looked at algorithms, different data types. And next week we're going to continue with the selection statement. You should also look at the schedule, and in the reference column on the far right hand side, you'll see links to pages in the textbook, web pages that you should read which are related to the topic that we're currently working on. There's also a link to example Python programs. Read the comments in the top of that file and it will explain how you can copy and paste and run any of the example programs in a Python editor window. So there will be movies on each topic as we go through the course. If you have any questions, you know where I am. You can use Piazza to post a question. You can email or you can message me through the C4 system. So look out for your assignments for the selection statement.